The scent of stale nutrient paste clung to the air of the starship's common mess, a familiar, bland comfort for the Cathar crew. But for Elara Vance, it tasted like ash. Her alien crewmates, with their multi-jointed limbs and clicking vocalizations, often spoke of humanity as fragile or simplistic, a new species barely worthy of their galactic federation's notice. She heard it in their hushed whispers, felt it in their dismissive gestures, even saw it in the way they carefully avoided touching her human hands. Commander Gor'lak, a Cathar warrior with chitinous plates that gleamed like polished obsidian, watched Elara from across the mess hall, his 6 eyes narrowed, his mandibles clicking softly. He often assigned her to the most mundane tasks, relegating her engineering skills to little more than grunt work. He believed in strict protocol, in systems that followed precise, logical patterns, and humanity, to him, was an illogical variable. Today, however, that quiet disdain was about to crack, not with a roar, but with the subtle tremor of a failing warp core, a sound only her human ears seemed to truly register. A low, ominous thrumming that vibrated through the deck plating beneath her worn boots. The sound was a deep, resonant hum, far below the range of most Cathar hearing, almost a feeling in her chest rather than a noise in her ears. It had started subtly, a barely perceptible change in the ship's usual background drone, but now it was growing, a dissonant chord building in the ship's bowels. Elara pushed her nutrient paste bowl away, the thick, gray gruel suddenly unappetizing. She stood, her gaze sweeping across the faces of the Cathar crew. Their antennae twitched with minor irritations, their multi-jointed fingers clicked against data pads, but none of them seemed to notice the growing unease in the ship's structure. Elara walked slowly towards the engineering access panel on the mess hall wall, placing a palm flat against the cool metal. The thrumming resonated clearly through her bones now, a rhythmic shudder that spoke of deep, systemic stress. Her eyes, human and unaugmented, saw the faint, almost imperceptible flicker in the overhead, lights that the Cathar, with their broader spectrum vision, dismissed as power fluctuations. She felt a faint warmth emanating from the panel, a warmth that shouldn't be there. Commander Gor'lak's clicking softened, turning into a low growl. His chitinous head swiveled towards her. "Vance," he rasped, his voice a series of clicks and guttural sounds that translated as a reprimand. "Do not tamper with ship systems without authorization. Your species is prone to unnecessary tactile investigation." His 6 eyes, each like a polished bead, fixed on her. Elara pulled her hand back, but her gaze remained locked on the access panel. "Commander, the warp core resonance is off," she stated, her voice calm but firm. "It's building. There's a harmonic distortion in the phase relays." Gor'lak's mandibles clicked faster, a sign of irritation. "Our diagnostics show optimal performance. The Cathar Imperial Fleet's warp cores are the most stable in the sector. Your human senses are unreliable. A mere 3 cycles ago, you claimed a minor vibration was a failing thruster, only for it to be a misaligned cargo crate." Elara remembered that incident. She had been right, of course, but her report had been dismissed. They had found the crate 2 shifts later, its shifted weight causing minor but measurable strain. "This is different, Commander," Elara insisted, her voice tight. "The signature is consistent with a decaying harmonic oscillation. It's subtle now, but it will escalate. I'm requesting access to the core's primary diagnostic logs." A low, collective murmur rippled through the Cathar crew. Requesting access to primary logs was a high-level command, usually reserved for senior Cathar engineers. Gor'lak's eyes narrowed further. "Denied. Return to your quarters, Engineer Vance. Your shift ended 5 cycles ago." Just as he spoke, a soft, high-pitched whine began to layer over the deep thrum. It was barely audible, a faint, almost musical sound that resonated in Elara's inner ear, causing a dull ache. She saw the Cathar crew's antennae twitch, this time with a collective sense of unease. They exchanged glances, their clicking vocalizations becoming more agitated. The faint flickering of the lights grew more pronounced, a rapid, almost strobe-like pulse that made the mess hall seem to jump and stutter. A low growl rumbled from the ship's depths, deeper and more visceral than before. Then, the ship shuddered violently, a sharp, metallic groan echoing through the decks. Plates shifted with a sound like tearing metal. Alarms blared, a piercing, insistent shriek that cut through the air, overriding the hum and the whine. Red emergency lights bathed the mess hall in a terrifying crimson glow. Hull breach. Hull breach in Sector Gamma 7. A computerized voice shrieked over the comms. Warning, warp core destabilization detected. Commander Gor'lak's form stiffened, his 6 eyes wide with a sudden, dawning horror. Impossible, he roared, but his voice was drowned out by the escalating chaos. Crew members scrambled, their multi-jointed limbs tangling in their haste. Some clicked frantic orders, others darted towards emergency stations. Elara, despite the fear gripping her, felt a grim satisfaction mix with her alarm. She had been right. To your stations, Gor'lak bellowed, his voice straining. He turned to Elara, his mandibles flaring. Vance, what is the source of the destabilization? Elara was already moving, pushing past a startled Cathar medic. I told you, Commander, harmonic oscillation. It's a cascading failure. We need to isolate the energy conduits to the primary phase coils, or the core will overload. She pointed towards the closest emergency access ladder, her human speed surprising the Cathar in their panic. Follow me? Gor'lak hesitated for only a fraction of a second, his ingrained protocol warring with the undeniable reality of the crisis. He barked an order to his bridge officers, then lumbered after Elara, his heavy strides shaking the deck. The ship groaned again, a deeper, more agonizing sound, like a dying beast. They plunged into the ship's lower decks, the emergency lights casting long, dancing shadows. The air grew thick with the smell of ozone and overheated circuits, a metallic tang that made Elara's nose sting. The thrumming from the core was now a deafening roar, vibrating through her entire body. Gor'lak kept pace, his heavy breathing a series of rasping clicks. His 6 eyes darted around, assessing the damage. Pipes had burst, spewing a milky coolant that hissed as it hit the hot deck plating. Sparks showered from exposed conduits, painting the darkness with erratic flashes of light. They reached the entrance to the primary engineering section, a massive blast door that pulsed with a dull, dangerous heat. Gor'lak pounded on the access panel. Override! Emergency access! The door groaned, refusing to open. Damaged! A calm voice crackled. Manual override required. Elara didn't wait. She yanked a heavy service tool from a wall rack, its cold, smooth metal familiar in her grip. There's an emergency bypass conduit here, she shouted over the roar, pointing to a smaller, armored panel near the doorframe. It's usually only accessed for critical overhauls. Gor'lak's gaze followed her finger. It is a Cathar design, human. You cannot bypass a Cathar failsafe. Elara ignored him. She inserted the tool into a narrow slot, her fingers working with practiced ease. The Cathar designs, while robust, often had elegant, if hidden, manual overrides, a universal truth of complex machinery. She felt for the resistance, twisted the tool, then pulled. A small, almost imperceptible click rewarded her. She heard Gor'lak suck in air through his respiratory vents, a sound of surprise. The heavy blast door hissed, then began to slowly retract, revealing the inferno within. The heat rolled out in a suffocating wave, smelling of burning plastic and superheated metal. The main engineering chamber was a chaotic nightmare. Exposed conduits pulsed with raw, unstable energy. Arc discharges flared wildly, spitting brilliant white light. The massive warp core, usually encased in a shimmering containment field, now pulsed with an angry, unstable red light. Its hum was a terrifying shriek. Gor'lak gasped, his mandibles slack. By the Great Star Forge, he whispered. The oscillation, it is consuming the containment field. Elara's eyes scanned the chaos, her mind racing, processing the data her senses were feeding her. She saw the energy surges, the collapsing field. We need to manually shunt power from the auxiliary reactors into the primary containment field, she yelled, her voice hoarse. But it's a temporary fix. The core is already running on emergency bypass. It's like trying to patch a collapsing dam with adhesive tape. Gor'lak regained his composure, his training kicking in. Cathar engineers, follow Elara Vance's lead. Prioritize core stabilization. Auxiliary power shunt. Now. His voice, usually so clipped and authoritarian, held a note of desperation. Two large Cathar engineers, their multi-jointed limbs surprisingly agile despite their bulk, followed Elara as she navigated the treacherous floor, dodging arc discharges and falling debris. The heat was immense, quickly soaking through her uniform. Sweat beaded on her forehead, stinging her eyes. She pointed to a massive console, its screens flickering wildly. "Override the core safety lockouts. I need direct access to the power regulators for the primary containment field." One of the Cathar engineers, a grizzled veteran named Rax, hesitated. "That is a Class 1 violation, human. The safeties are there to prevent catastrophic overload." Elara spun on him, her eyes blazing. "We are past catastrophic overload. The core is minutes from critical mass. Do you want to watch the ship vaporize, or do you want to break a rule and have a chance to live?" Rax's 6 eyes blinked. He glanced at Gor'lak, who gave a sharp nod. Rax quickly moved to the console, his fingers, surprisingly delicate despite their size, flying across the holographic interface. He punched in override codes with a practiced speed, his mandibles clicking rapidly. A series of warnings flashed across the screen. "Critical system compromise. Irreversible damage imminent." "Done," Rax rasped. Elara moved in front of the console, her fingers hovering over the controls. Her breath hitched. The screen showed the containment field integrity dropping by the second, a rapidly shrinking green bar. The warp core itself pulsed with a terrifying, malevolent red. She took a deep breath, focusing, ignoring the roar and the heat. She saw the interwoven energy conduits, the failing regulators. The core was not just destabilizing, it was actively rejecting the power input, like a dying heart rejecting its own blood. "The core isn't just failing," Elara murmured, more to herself than to them. "It's fighting us. It's like something is interfering with the energy flow from asterisk within asterisk." She began to manipulate the controls, her hands moving with a practiced speed that belied her apparent calm. She rerouted power, isolated failing conduits, and opened auxiliary channels, trying to force more energy into the collapsing containment field. The air shimmered with the intense heat, and the smell of ozone was thick enough to taste. The core's shriek grew louder, a sound that grated on her very bones. Her actions were a desperate gamble, a frantic dance against the clock. The green bar on the screen flickered, dropping, then slowly, agonizingly slowly, began to rise inch by agonizing inch. A cheer, a series of Cathar clicks and guttural cries, erupted from the other engineers. Gor'lak, who had been watching with rapt attention, let out a deep, rasping sigh of relief. The red glow from the core lessened, becoming a dull, angry orange. The shrieking roar softened to a dangerous growl. "The containment field is stable, for now," Elara stated, wiping sweat from her brow. Her voice was raspy. "But the core is running on less than 40% efficiency. We can't jump. We're stranded." Gor'lak moved closer, his chitinous plates reflecting the emergency lights. He looked at Elara with a new intensity in his 6 eyes, a mix of grudging respect and profound confusion. "How did you know, human? Our diagnostics showed nothing until the last moments." Elara pointed to a section of the main core chamber, past the immediate containment field. "See the phase coil array. On the lower right, there's a microfracture. It's barely visible, less than a millimeter wide, but it's creating a resonant frequency that's disrupting the energy flow. Your sensors are programmed to detect macrofractures, not these subtle harmonic distortions." Gor'lak squinted, then pulled a small optical scanner from his belt. He activated it, sending a beam of light towards the point Elara indicated. The scanner whirred, then displayed a microscopic image on its screen. A tiny, hairline fracture, almost invisible to the naked eye, propagated through the tough, alien alloy. Gor'lak's mandibles parted slightly, a clear sign of astonishment. "Such precision," he muttered. "Cathar sensors are designed for robustness, not such fine detail." Elara shrugged. "Human eyes see different things, we adapt. But finding that fracture won't get us home. The core needs a complete overhaul, and we don't have the parts or the time. We're in an uncharted system, far from Federation lines. No distress beacon signal would reach that far." Gor'lak's shoulders slumped, a rare display of dejection. Then we are stranded. This exploration vessel was designated for deep space cartography. We carry no long-range transport shuttles, only short-range survey craft. His voice was flat. A new voice cut in, soft and melodic from behind them. Perhaps not entirely without hope, Commander. It was Tylos, the ship's xenology officer, a being from the gentle, avian-like Xylosian species. Tylos was small, with delicate, iridescent feathers and large, intelligent eyes that blinked slowly. He floated silently on a personal anti-gravity platform, his slight form barely disturbing the air. While our long-range comms are indeed limited, our short-range survey craft is equipped with a Class 3 hyperfrequency emitter for local planetary mapping. If we could boost its range, even slightly, it might reach a passing Federation patrol route within this cluster. Gor'lak turned, his 6 eyes fixing on Tylos. And how, Xenologist, do you propose we boost its range? Our primary power systems are compromised. Our subspace comms are offline. Tylos tilted his head, his feathers rustling softly. My studies indicate that human ingenuity, while unconventional, often produces unexpected results. Engineer Vance, your ability to perceive and adapt to subtle systemic anomalies is remarkable. Perhaps you could devise a way to jury-rig a temporary power boost for the emitter, even with limited resources. Elara looked from Tylos to Gor'lak. The Cathar commander was still processing the idea, his mind struggling with the concept of jury-rigging, a term that surely held no place in Cathar military engineering manuals. It would require raw materials, Elara said slowly, thinking aloud. Something to amplify the signal, a stable power source for a temporary comms array, and a way to focus the emission. This ship is a scientific vessel, not a salvage yard. What resources do we have on board that aren't tied into essential systems? Tylos glided forward, his voice gentle. The Xenology lab contains several mineral samples from our last survey mission. Many of these are highly conductive, some possessing unique crystalline structures that resonate with specific energy frequencies. They were deemed scientifically interesting, but not militarily useful by Cathar protocols. He gave a soft, almost imperceptible chirp that might have been a wry smile. Gor'lak's mandibles clicked, a sound of frustration. Minerals for a communications array? This is absurd. Elara's eyes lit up. Not absurd, Commander, resourceful. A crystal lattice could act as a focusing lens. If we can find a way to induce an energy charge into them, we could create a directional beacon. It would be weak, but focused. We'd need a stable energy source, though, something independent of the main power grid. She looked around the damaged engineering bay. Her gaze fell on a stack of depleted power cells used to power maintenance equipment. They were mostly drained, but perhaps 1 or 2 held enough residual charge for a brief, critical burst. The maintenance power cells, Elara stated, pointing. They're low, but if we can pool their remaining charge and discharge it all at once through a custom circuit, we might get enough power for a short burst transmission. Gor'lak remained silent, his 6 eyes fixed on Elara, clearly weighing the unconventional proposal against the alternative. Death in deep space. He looked at the flickering screens, the dull orange glow of the core, then at Elara's determined face. Very well, Engineer Vance. You have authorization. Xenologist Tylos, you will assist Engineer Vance. Your knowledge of these scientifically interesting minerals may prove useful. Rax, you will oversee the repairs on the hull breaches and monitor the warp core. We have 4 human standard days of emergency power left before life support begins to fail completely. His voice was grim, but held a new resolve. The next few hours were a blur of frantic activity. Elara, Tylos, and 2 Cathar engineers, assigned by Gor'lak, moved to the Xenology lab. The lab itself was a marvel of alien design, filled with shimmering containment fields holding exotic flora and fauna, and shelves lined with geological samples. The air here was cleaner, less tinged with ozone, and smelled faintly of strange, alien earth. Tylos, with his delicate, multi-jointed fingers, carefully extracted several crystalline samples. This one, he chirped, holding up a shard that pulsed with a faint, internal luminescence, is a Cathar-classified resonating quartz. It amplifies energy frequencies in the lower spectrum. And this, he indicated a dull, obsidian-like rock, is a void stone. It absorbs and then releases energy in a highly unstable burst. Not ideal, but perhaps useful for a momentary surge. Elara examined the samples. The resonating quartz felt cool and smooth in her hand, its faint glow almost imperceptible. The void stone, however, felt oddly warm, vibrating slightly. She felt a tingle of fascination. Void stone, unstable. Perfect for a single-use burst. We need to rig a circuit that charges the quartz, then dumps the void stone's entire stored energy into it in a precise pulse. The quartz will focus and amplify it. It's risky. The void stone could explode if the discharge isn't perfectly timed. Tylos's large eyes widened. Explosion? That would be problematic for my research specimens. Elara gave him a tight smile. More problematic for us if we don't get a signal out. We need a stable charging array for the quartz. Something that can safely handle the residual energy from the maintenance cells. They began to scavenge. Elara stripped down a damaged Cathar diagnostic drone, extracting its internal power regulators and microcircuitry. She meticulously rewired components, bypassing safety protocols, creating a raw, efficient circuit. The Cathar engineers, initially skeptical, watched her work with a growing sense of awe. They had never seen such improvisational engineering. Their methods were based on precise schematics and standardized parts. Elara, however, was building something new, something bespoke, out of broken bits and pieces. Tylos, meanwhile, provided insights into the crystalline structures, advising Elara on optimal points for energy induction and focus. His scientific knowledge complemented her practical engineering skills in a way neither could have achieved alone. The Xylosian's quiet enthusiasm for the unexpected applications of his specimens was contagious. They spent an entire human-standard day in the lab, the rhythmic hum of the failing warp core a constant, ominous reminder of their predicament. Elara's fingers became stained with grease and tiny cuts. Her eyes burned from staring at microscopic wires and circuits. She tasted metallic grit in her mouth, a combination of ozone and the subtle flavor of the alien minerals. Finally, she stepped back, wiping her hands on her uniform. Before her lay a crude, yet complex array. It was a tangle of salvaged wires, repurposed Cathar components, and the gleaming resonating quartz, now held in a makeshift mount fashioned from a discarded equipment casing. The void stone, a dull, dark presence, was nestled within a reinforced chamber, connected by a thick, insulated conduit. "It's ready," Elara said, her voice hoarse from lack of sleep. "We need to move it to the survey craft. The craft's emitter needs to be physically integrated into this array. And we need to be quick. Every minute we waste, our chances of being found decrease." Moving the makeshift array to the survey craft, housed in a separate, smaller hangar bay, was a delicate operation. The ship shuddered periodically, and each tremor sent a jolt of anxiety through Elara. They secured the array within the cramped cockpit of the survey craft, integrating it with the craft's main communication emitter. Elara worked with a focused intensity, her movements precise and economical. She bypassed the craft's power regulation systems, rerouting them directly to her custom array. This meant that the moment they activated the void stone, it would dump its entire charge, sending a single, powerful burst of energy through the emitter. If it failed, they would not get another chance. Commander Gor'lak arrived, his 6 eyes scanning the makeshift setup. His mandibles were tight. "Engineer Vance, this is irregular. The survey craft systems are not designed for such energy surges. There is a high probability of system degradation, perhaps even explosion." Elara turned to him, her face grim. "Commander, the ship is running on emergency power with a failing warp core. We are literally dying here. An irregular solution is our only solution. The probability of explosion if we don't try this is 100%. The probability of a successful transmission with this array is unknown, but greater than 0. Gor'lak was silent for a long moment, then gave a sharp, decisive click of his mandibles. "Understood, proceed. I will activate the craft's power systems when you are ready." He positioned himself by the hangar bay door, a massive, imposing figure. Elara took a deep breath. She had done all she could. "Ready, Commander," she said, her voice barely a whisper. Gor'lak nodded. With a series of guttural clicks, he barked orders into his comm unit. The survey craft's internal lights flickered, then came to life, powered by the dying mother ship. The comm emitter on the craft began to hum, a low, steady sound. Elara double-checked her connections, then pressed a single, glowing red button on her makeshift control panel. A low thrum began in the quartz array, growing quickly into a high-pitched whine. The void stone, nestled in its chamber, began to glow with an intense internal light, a deep, unsettling purple. The light pulsed, growing brighter and brighter, building with alarming speed. Elara felt a surge of heat from the void stone, a warmth that quickly became searing. The air crackled with static electricity, making the hairs on her arms stand on end. The whining from the array reached a deafening pitch. Then, with a blinding flash of purple light and a sound like a thunderclap, the void stone discharged. The entire survey craft shuddered violently. A wave of concussive force slammed into Elara, throwing her back against the cockpit wall. Her ears rang, and a metallic taste filled her mouth. The smell of ozone was overwhelming. Through the ringing in her ears, Elara heard Gor'lak's shocked bellow. She struggled to sit up, her vision blurry. The void stone chamber was charred, smoking, its internal structure collapsed. The quartz array still pulsed faintly, but the intense purple light was gone. The craft's comm emitter, however, was silent. "Did it work?" Elara gasped, forcing the words out. Gor'lak was peering at a holographic screen on his arm-mounted comm unit. His 6 eyes were wide, and his mandibles were slack. "A signal, a burst signal, detected by Federation Outpost Delta 7. It is weak, barely discernible, but it is there." A wave of profound relief washed over Elara, so intense it made her dizzy. They had a chance. They were not alone in the vast, uncaring blackness. "Outpost Delta 7 will initiate a search pattern in this sector," Gor'lak continued, his voice hushed. "They estimate a relief vessel could reach us in approximately 3.5 human standard weeks. 3.5 weeks. It was a long time, an eternity for a ship running on fumes. "We need to conserve power, Commander," Elara said, the urgency returning. "Every system not essential for life support needs to be shut down. We also need to secure every salvageable part, every drop of coolant. We might need to move this ship to a safer, more stable orbit within the system." Gor'lak nodded, his usual stoicism returning, though a hint of something new respect flickered in his eyes. "Understood, Engineer Vance. Your unconventional methods have secured our initial survival. Now, we must ensure our prolonged survival." The next 3 weeks were a grueling test of endurance. The ship went dark, its main lights extinguished, replaced by the faint glow of emergency power cells. The Cathar, accustomed to highly regulated environments, struggled with the cold, the darkness, and the dwindling resources. Their complex digestive systems reacted poorly to the limited nutrient-paced rations. Elara, however, adapted. She moved through the darkened corridors with ease, her human eyes adjusting to the low light. She felt the subtle shifts in the ship's structure, heard the groans of stressed metal. She worked tirelessly with Rax and other Cathar engineers, patching minor ruptures, jury-rigging filters for the recycled air, and optimizing every last watt of power. Rax, who had initially been skeptical, now sought out Elara's advice on the most unusual problems. His clicks and guttural sounds became less of a reprimand and more of a collaborative discussion. Tylos, the Xenologist, proved invaluable in managing the dwindling food supply, finding ways to stretch the nutrient paste with small, protein-rich fungi cultivated in his lab, a feat that caused no small amount of Cathar discomfort. He also provided much-needed psychological support, his gentle demeanor calming frayed nerves. One evening, as Elara was tightening a seal on a patched air conduit in a remote service tunnel, she heard a soft, scuttling sound. She froze, her hand instinctively reaching for the heavy wrench at her hip. The ship was supposedly clear of any uncontained life forms. The scuttling came again, closer this time, accompanied by a faint, metallic scraping. A small, dark shape scurried into the dim light of her headlamp. It was a native creature of the system they were stranded in, a small, multi-legged scavenger, no bigger than her fist. It had likely hitched a ride when they made their emergency landing on the nearby asteroid to collect more voidstone samples for future attempts, a task Elara had insisted upon. The creature was attracted to the ship's failing systems, drawn by the residual energy and the warmth. Cathar protocols dictated immediate extermination of all foreign life forms on board. Before Elara could react, a Cathar security officer, a massive warrior named Gor'lak, rounded the corner. His 6 eyes immediately spotted the creature. With a low growl, he raised his energy rifle, its muzzle glowing faintly. "Infestation," he snarled. "Such vermin will consume our remaining resources." "Wait," Elara shouted, stepping in front of the creature, shielding it with her body. The creature, startled, froze, its tiny legs twitching. Gor'lak lowered his rifle slightly, his mandibles twitching in confusion. "Human, step aside, it is a contaminant." "It's just a scavenger," Elara countered, her voice calm but firm. "It's looking for warmth and residual energy. It's not harmful. It's actually fascinating. Look at its exoskeleton. It's adapted to incredibly harsh conditions. It could tell us something about this system." Gor'lak snorted, a sound of dismissive disgust. "A fascinating contaminant that will consume our life support systems. It must be purged." Elara shook her head. "It won't consume anything significant. We've sealed off all the vital systems. Let it be. It's just trying to survive like us." She knelt down, extending a cautious hand towards the creature. It scurried back, then hesitated, its multiple eyes blinking in the dim light. Gor'lak watched, his 6 eyes wide, his mandibles slightly agape. He had never seen a human interact with an unclassified life form in such a manner. Cathar society valued order and control above all else. Elara, however, seemed to see value in the unexpected. Suddenly, the ship shuddered violently, a fresh series of groans echoing through the corridor. A large section of the ceiling plating above them buckled, threatening to collapse. Dust and small debris rained down. Gor'lak instinctively ducked, his heavy form hitting the deck. Elara reacted faster. She shoved Gor'lak clear, pushing him out of the immediate danger zone. He stumbled, then scrambled to his feet, his 6 eyes darting upwards. The small scavenger, sensing the instability, darted into a narrow pipe conduit, disappearing from view. "Are you all right, Commander Gor'lak?" Elara asked, her voice tinged with concern. Gor'lak blinked, his mandibles working. He was unused to receiving help from a junior officer, let alone a human. And she had protected a contaminant before saving him. "I am unharmed Engineer Vance," he grated, his voice oddly subdued. He looked at the pipe where the creature had disappeared, then back at Elara. The moment had passed. The Cathar security officer turned, his heavy boots clanking as he walked away, leaving Elara alone in the dim, dusty corridor. But Elara noticed something subtle, a slight hesitation in his steps, a brief glance back, a sign that her unusual actions had sparked a moment of confusion, perhaps even a seed of introspection, in the rigid Cathar warrior. The ship settled back into its groaning silence. Elara continued her work, but the encounter with the scavenger and Gor'lak stayed with her. It highlighted the vast differences between human and Cathar perceptions of life, of survival, of what was useful and what was threatening. As the days blurred into weeks, the ship's condition grew worse. The air recycling system, despite Elara's best efforts, became less efficient. The air grew heavy, stale, and the faint metallic tang of ozone never quite left. Rationing became stricter. Tylos, the Xenologist, was invaluable in maintaining morale. He had a soothing, melodic voice and would tell stories of ancient Xylosian legends, tales of delicate flora growing in harsh environments, of unlikely symbiosis between different species. These stories, seemingly unrelated to their predicament, subtly reminded the crew of resilience, of finding strength in unexpected places. One day, while rationing nutrient paste in the mess, Commander Gor'lak found himself seated across from Elara. The atmosphere was unusually quiet, the hunger gnawing at them. Gor'lak had barely touched his ration. His chitinous plates seemed duller, less vibrant without the ship's full power. "Engineer Vance," he said, his voice lower than usual. The Cathar prioritize efficiency and strength. Our society is built on precision, on adherence to established protocols. Your species, however, seems to thrive on chaos, on improvising with whatever is at hand. How is this effective? Elara looked at her own, meager portion of paste. We call it adaptability, Commander, or stubbornness. We don't have thousands of years of galactic history to draw on for every solution. We figure things out as we go. When our systems fail, we don't just have one backup plan. We have 5, and then we make a 6th one out of spare parts and a prayer. She paused, then added, We don't like to give up, not even when it looks hopeless. Gor'lak's 6 eyes seemed to flicker. He looked down at his nutrient paste, then back at Elara. Hope is an illogical variable. Hope does not fix a failing warp core. No, Elara agreed, but it makes you try. It makes you keep pushing when every logical system tells you to stop. It's why we sent that signal. It's why we're still breathing. The silence stretched between them, filled only by the faint, unhealthy hum of the ship. Gor'lak finally picked up his spoon and slowly, deliberately, began to eat his paste. It was a small gesture, but Elara recognized it as a subtle shift, a grudging acknowledgement of her perspective. On what Elara calculated was the 20th day of being stranded, the ship's emergency power systems began to fail more rapidly. The lights dimmed even further, becoming barely more than faint glows. The recycled air grew even heavier, making every breath a conscious effort. The cold was pervasive. The Cathar, designed for warm, controlled environments, began to show signs of extreme distress. Their chitinous plates grew brittle, their movements sluggish. Even Gor'lak moved with a visible effort. Commander, Rax reported, his voice weak. Life support efficiency is at 15%. Oxygen levels are dropping. We cannot last another 3 days, let alone 5. Despair settled over the bridge like a heavy shroud. Gor'lak's mandibles were clamped shut, his eyes focused on the flickering status screen. There was no protocol for this, no battle strategy, just slow, agonizing decay. Elara felt the cold deep in her bones, but her mind was racing. She thought of the scavenger creature, surviving in the cold, desolate pipes. She thought of Tylos's stories of hardy flora. Commander, Elara said, her voice cutting through the despair. What about the ship's auxiliary atmospheric processors, the ones for handling Class 4 biohazards? Gor'lak turned, his eyes narrowing in confusion. Those are for purging corrosive airborne agents, Engineer. They require immense power, and they filter out everything, including oxygen. They are designed for planetary environments, not internal ship systems. But they have their own, self-contained power cells, right? Elara pressed. And they're designed to process incredibly thin, hostile atmospheres. If we can reroute their power to a small, localized section, say, the bridge, and perhaps 2 medical bays, we could create pockets of breathable air. It wouldn't be the whole ship, but it would buy us time. Gor'lak's 6 eyes widened. He looked at Rax, then back at Elara. It is a desperate measure. It would require stripping power from other non-critical systems, leaving other sections of the ship without any environmental control whatsoever. We're already there, Commander, Elara countered, her voice firm. The rest of the ship is dying anyway. This is about saving the crew that remains. We could rotate personnel through the breathable zones, give them a chance to recover. Gor'lak was silent for a long moment, then he let out a low, guttural sigh. Engineer Vance, I am beginning to believe your species is truly mad, but also uniquely tenacious. Rax, organize teams. Strip down the auxiliary atmospheric processors. Engineer Vance, lead the integration. Focus on the bridge and medical bay, too. Move immediately. The next 48 hours were the most physically demanding Elara had ever endured. Working in near darkness, with dwindling oxygen, they systematically dismantled the massive atmospheric processors. The components were heavy, cumbersome, designed for planetary installation. Elara directed the Cathar engineers, guiding their powerful limbs to disconnect heavy conduits, bypass complex safety interlocks. She designed a series of makeshift connectors and filters, using whatever they could salvage. Discarded uniforms, spare insulation, even a few of Tylos's research specimens that had fibrous, filtering properties. The Cathar struggled with the intricate human-scale wiring, but Elara's patience and precise instructions guided them. She felt their exhaustion, saw the visible signs of their failing physiology, but they pushed on, driven by Gor'lak's unwavering command and the faint glimmer of a new, desperate hope. The smell in the air grew worse, a combination of stale air, dying electronics, and the faint, coppery scent of tired bodies. The silence on the ship was broken only by the rasping breaths of the crew and the occasional clang of metal as they worked. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, the last connection was made. Elara, her hands shaking from exhaustion, activated the makeshift system. With a deep shudder, the repurposed atmospheric processor hummed to life. A faint, almost imperceptible current of cool, filtered air began to flow through the bridge. It was thin, sterile, but it was breathable. The Cathar crew on the bridge, their bodies slumped against consoles, took deep, rasping breaths. Their chitinous plates seemed to regain a faint sheen. Relief, profound and almost physical, settled over them. Gor'lak, standing rigidly by the main view screen, inhaled deeply, his mandibles slowly parting. Oxygen, he rasped, the word tasting strange on his tongue. It is sufficient. Elara slumped against a console, too tired to even feel triumph. Her lungs burned, but the air felt like pure luxury. Tylos, who had been quietly supporting her through the entire process, glided over, his soft feathers brushing her arm. "You have done it, Engineer Vance," he chirped, his voice filled with admiration. "You have spun life from nothing." Just as Elara closed her eyes, utterly spent, a faint, almost imperceptible flicker appeared on the main view screen, which was now powered by the jury-rigged system. It was a tiny, distant light, a mere pinprick in the vast, inky blackness of space. Gor'lak, despite his fatigue, saw it instantly. His 6 eyes focused, and he let out a sharp, guttural click, a sound of profound awe. "Contact," he roared, his voice suddenly strong, renewed. A relief vessel, Federation markings, 3,000 kilometers and closing. A wave of elated clicks and guttural cries erupted on the bridge. The Cathar crew, moments before on the verge of collapse, now surged with a desperate, joyous energy. Elara pushed herself upright, her heart thumping against her ribs. The tiny light on the screen grew steadily, resolving into the unmistakable silhouette of a Federation long-range rescue frigate. Tears stung Elara's eyes, a rare, uncontrolled human emotion. They had made it. They had truly made it. Commander Gor'lak turned from the view screen, his gaze sweeping over the exhausted crew, then fixing on Elara. He lumbered towards her, his heavy steps unusually soft. He stopped directly in front of her, his imposing form casting a long shadow in the dim light. He extended a multi-jointed hand, its chitinous plates rough and unyielding. Elara hesitated for a moment, then, understanding, she grasped his hand. It was an alien gesture for him, a human one for her, but in that moment it was a bridge between species, a symbol of shared survival. "Engineer Vance," Gor'lak said, his voice surprisingly deep and resonant, free of its usual clicks. "You have shown me the true meaning of resilience, your species, your adaptability. It is not chaos. It is a strength we Cathar have overlooked. You have saved this vessel, and you have saved my crew. I am in your debt." His 6 eyes held an unblinking, profound respect. Elara felt a warmth spread through her, a warmth that had nothing to do with the failing ship systems and everything to do with connection. "We all did our part, Commander," she said, her voice a little shaky with emotion. The relief vessel docked with a gentle thud, a sound that resonated with the promise of rescue and hot food. The airlock hissed open, and the scent of fresh, circulated air, clean and vital, flooded the bridge. It smelled like salvation. As the rescue crew, a mix of Federation species, including several other humans, entered the ship, they looked at the dilapidated vessel and its weary yet determined Cathar crew with astonishment. They saw the jury-rigged air processors, the makeshift repairs, the evidence of desperate, unconventional survival. Commander Gor'lak stepped forward, his posture rigid but his voice clear. He spoke of the warp core failure, of the desperate signal, and then his 6 eyes flickered to Elara. "It was Engineer Elara Vance who perceived the initial anomaly. It was her unconventional ingenuity that allowed us to transmit a signal. And it was her relentless human spirit that sustained us when all Cathar protocols indicated inevitable demise. The other Cathar on the bridge, including Rax and Gorkin, murmured their agreement, a new, unfamiliar respect in their guttural sounds. One of the human rescue engineers, a woman with kind eyes and a familiar terrestrial accent, approached Elara. "Engineer Vance, we heard your signal. Amazing work. Seriously, building a comm array out of void stone. That's legendary." Elara managed a weak smile. "Just doing my job." The human rescue engineer winked. "No, you did more than that. You pulled a miracle out of thin air. The Federation needs more people like you, engineer. People who don't just follow the book, but write new chapters when the old ones fail." As Elara was finally escorted off the battered vessel, breathing the clean, fresh air of the rescue frigate, she looked back at the dying ship that had been their home, their prison, and ultimately their proving ground. She saw Commander Gor'lak, now being debriefed by the relief captain, his massive form still imposing, but his 6 eyes holding a newfound thoughtfulness. She saw Tylos, gracefully floating beside him, his soft feathers shimmering. Elara knew that her perception of the Cathar, and indeed of the wider galaxy, had shifted. They were not just rigid, rule-bound aliens. They were beings capable of learning, of adapting, of finding new forms of respect. And they, in turn, had seen something new in humanity. They had seen not fragility, but an unyielding, innovative spirit. The journey home would be long, filled with debriefings and medical checkups. But Elara knew she was no longer just Engineer Vance, the human. She was Elara Vance, the engineer who had seen a problem differently, who had used human ingenuity to defy the odds, and in doing so, had subtly changed the perceptions of an entire alien species. The taste of stale nutrient paste was long gone, replaced by the clean taste of hope, and the quiet satisfaction of a job done not by the book, but by heart and by hand. Heart and by